This is an understandable but fundamental mistake that beginners at drawing make so often, and it's really easy to understand why they make it. And in some ways, it takes a little control and discipline to not make it. But it's quite possible that nothing will hold us back in developing and improving our artwork than doing this. And if I'm honest, it's a problem that I've probably contributed to in some way for some people. Because so many people have told me that they've been really inspired by my drawings to start drawing themselves or to start drawing again. Now, of course, that's a tremendously honouring thing, and I think it's great, and I'm really excited for them. But the problem is that these are the sorts of drawings of mine that they've seen, probably on my Instagram, that have inspired them to want to draw either streetscapes or architecture. These are the images that are exciting them as they go to draw themselves. If they like architecture, it's understandable that the things that they really want to draw is grand architecture. But the problem is that these are the sorts of subjects that so attract them for the same reasons they attracted me. But the problem is, this is not only not a very good place to start to learn drawing, it's a very unhelpful place to start to learn drawing. This is a bit of an exaggeration. Almost nobody would decide to draw this scene to kickstart their journey learning to draw architecture. But I exaggerate the point to make the point that so often I see artists who have drawn subjects that were way beyond their ability to understand all of the various components involved. I remember thinking at one point I could never draw the Musée du Louvre. And at that stage, I couldn't have. Or at least I couldn't have drawn it well. And the best learning practice from an educational learning point of view is to learn to do some things well, to learn to understand some concepts, usually the more basic, simple ones that we need at almost every stage of this skill, and to work on those till we can do them almost without thinking, and then we start to push ourselves into new areas. Then we take on new elements, new aspects of that task that are a bit more complex often, but are a means now of us extending not just our knowledge, but also what we can do, what we can perform, what we can draw. Because with any one project or with any one drawing, a lot of it we can do comfortably and easily, and so we can focus on the parts that are newer, on the parts that challenge us more for some reason. And when we do that for a bit, those newer parts slide into our comfort zone, and we can look at a newer, more difficult concept to now incorporate into that. Again, comparison with learning the piano is really helpful. We start with the Jumping Frogs tunes, the simple playing around with notes, getting used to using our fingers correctly and moving from note to note. And bit by bit, we inch towards a Beethoven concerto. If I have a piano teacher, they usually have a series of lessons all worked out for me. And if I do a drawing course, it usually starts at a level that's appropriate for the level of the people doing it. And then lesson by lesson, it moves either into new areas or demanding more advanced skills. And it's a good way to learn because I think it is the fastest way for most people to learn. And I think one of the most important things is that what we attempt at any one point is not too difficult for where we're at. And therefore we can do well in it and build confidence. Because if we're doing something for fun, nothing's going to be less fun than thinking that we're failing all the time. Because then we might as well give it up, even though it's something that we sort of really want to do. And I look at so many drawings from people who are clearly starting out in their drawing where the subject matter is great. It's really interesting, but it's clearly way beyond their ability level. There are just too many things that they've had to juggle all at once. Line work, perspective, depth, dealing with difficult textures such as leaves and cobblestones and bricks, having to deal with a huge amount of detail that's impossible to draw accurately. These are all the things that can make architecture really exciting if we love buildings. So these are the things we really want to draw. But if we draw things consistently, that are really beyond our ability level and our experience level, so that we don't really ever have a chance of drawing them well, then we come back to my principle you've probably heard me say if you've watched a few of my videos, which is we get better at whatever we practice. And if what I'm practicing at is drawing architecture and buildings consistently, inaccurately, I'm going to get very good at drawing these things not real well. So what do? What we do is we stop trying to draw buildings as beautiful and as grand and as complicated as this before we're ready to. We admire the architecture, but when we draw subjects that we have a chance to draw well. We find architecture that is interesting, and we certainly can find scenes that have various elements, because it's good to get practice at drawing architecture, but also trees and foliage and cars and roads. If we want to draw streetscapes, all of these elements and street signs are all a part of it. So it's good to start where we want to finish, but to start with a subject without too many issues to have to deal with. And then we draw it in whatever way we want. You might recognize my drawing of this scene from a video I did recently on 5-minute sketches. Now let me say, this really challenged me to try and capture this in just 5 minutes. But it did occur to me after I'd drawn it that this is actually a very good example of a building that would be good for beginners to try and draw in this scene, but having more than 5 minutes, taking 30, 45, 60 minutes to do it. And to concentrate on doing a simpler drawing well and working out how I'm going to draw the various elements of it well, whether it's the actual architecture or the foliage or the vehicles or the street itself and street elements such as the traffic lights, learning to cope with overlapping objects and creating a nice sense of depth, having a sense of some things are closer than others. All of these are much better and much more effectively worked out in a drawing where there are enough interesting things so that we're actually interested in drawing it, but where they're still fairly limited so that we can work at them without getting overwhelmed. And this was the other one I did in that same lesson. A more complex scene in lots of ways, but I simplified it, which certainly was to make it achievable in the time frame. But again, if I'm not rushing to do this in 5 minutes, this one actually took me 6 minutes if I'm honest, then I've got more time than I took here to concentrate on just seeking to get the proportions right of the various parts of the Pantheon. I've got more time to just focus on these perspective angles and getting them correct. I've got some cars I can work on. I've got street furniture I can get experience in. I've got some little people that if I really don't like drawing people, will be probably easier to draw because of their small scale, but can still give me some practice at introducing figures into my drawing. So although there's quite a lot of things here I could work on, the distance I am from them, and particularly if I draw it in a relatively small drawing, lets me, in fact, doesn't just let me, insists that I simplify it, and then I can have a good look afterwards and say, what do I need to work on? And I think once we choose a certain type of subject at a certain scale, and we develop a certain technique for drawing it, whether it involves tone or whether we do it entirely in line with hatching, we keep at it until we think, I'm nailing each of these. They're all looking pretty good. I need more of a challenge. But there's no point trying to do 100 push-ups if I can't do 10. So if I'm a beginner at drawing, it's really important that I don't try and do subjects that are way too complex for me. It will certainly slow down my ability to develop the skills I'm wanting, because there'll be too many different things I have to think about all at once, all the time. And it will probably just lead to discouragement and cause me to think, I can't do this, when that's not true at all. And that's the real shame. And it's one of the challenges that I think as self-taught artists, finding our own resources, particularly online resources, face. Because in a course, the teachers should have responsibility for not taking us faster than we can go, to develop our skill advancement at a constructive pace. But if I'm finding my own reference materials and deciding what I will draw every time myself, which is a great freedom to have, I need to match that freedom though with my ability level and have the control to say, I love this building and I really look forward to drawing it one day. It's a goal I have for next year. But right now, what are the subjects? What's the level of architecture of streetscape that I can draw well or have a chance of drawing well now? They're the subjects that are really going to advance my learning, my drawing development. So let's continue to enjoy drawings and artworks from people that are way beyond what we're able to do right now, and not try and rush to start at the place that they finished, but equally to be encouraged and to think, well, they started at the start as well. And in the end, it's not a race, it's not a competition, but I can develop and improve my drawings line by line, drawing by drawing. And I wish you every success in that. But please, walk before you run. Choose subjects that you have a chance to do well. And when you're comfortable with that, push on to more challenges. And it may not take a long time to move through a certain skill level. It might only take a few weeks. It might only take a few drawings. But if I discipline myself to not really move on too far until I can do what I'm doing well, that will be the pace that's most helpful. G'day, I'm Stephen Travers. At the end of the day, we want to draw things that we like, and we will find that more enjoyable. And if we're not enjoying our drawing experience, then what's the point? But if improving my drawing, if developing my skills is important, if that brings me enjoyment, then moving through my subjects and the things I'm trying to capture in my drawing in some sort of measured and systematic way will help me get to that place I want to get to faster, and I think in a more satisfying way. But whatever you're drawing, however you're drawing it, have fun. I'll see you next time. Bye.